Okay. All right. Let's get started. Oh, great. So this atheist tries to debunk God in the Bible. So make sure to watch till the end because I have a Bible verse that will tie all of this together. Let's get right into the video. Shout out to Cliff and give me an answer for making these videos. Hopefully I will be able to meet them one day and do a podcast with them. Let's get into it.
Worth anything.
Making an artificial conflation between utilitarian. Aren't you making an artificial conflation between utilitarian value and ethical value and saying that having a purpose gives you value?
You're right. I am saying that if she is an accidental collection of atoms, for her to argue that she has innate worth is an exercise in la-la land. It's a fantasy. It's an illusion. It's a personal taste. Like, do you like broccoli or do you like asparagus? Well, Cliff, I like broccoli. All right, that's her taste. It doesn't mean that broccoli is better than asparagus. It's a taste she has. So, do you think you're worth anything? Yes, I think I'm the greatest. Okay, well, that's a taste. No, I think I'm a loser, because I'm not a whatever. That's a taste. So my point is, if in reality she's simply a hunk of primordial slime evolved to a higher order, to argue that she has innate, objective worth is egotism. It's just a flight into fantasy land. Because in reality, she's no different from this. This is matter and energy, and she's matter and energy, and
Hello everyone. Okay.
Yes, it does, but perhaps I'm just slow today, but I still don't see that you've answered the question. What you seem to be saying is that God is capable of having tastes, that by way of being tastes held by God are objectively binding rather than merely relative. And I don't see where this comes from.
okay, great question. If God has a character that is just, if God is a thinking being who can create a value of justice, then that value is real. It's objective. If there is no
Hello, Saint Michael the Archangel and Mr. Split. Welcome to the live.
creator who can create the value of justice, then obviously you and I create the value of justice. But that's just the result of our minds concluding this is just, this is unjust. There's no real value of justice. We just create it in our heads.
Well, first, if you have created a value of justice in your head, that justice is real in as far as you have successfully created it. But more to the point, why is it that the justice created by God is real if he did have to create it, whereas justice created by us is not real?
Because what is justice based on? It's based on the dignity of this person. What's unjust? Injustice, or being unjust, is me devaluing this human being who has an innate value. So, if she has no value, I can steal her backpack, I can stamp on her, because she's trash. But if she has innate value, then for me to steal her backpack or for me to step on her is a denial of her innate worth.
And that innate worth can somehow be conferred by God where it is not conferable by mere human beings.
Precisely. Because God is eternal, He's the one who created her for a purpose, so she's more than a cosmic accident. She's a creation of God created for a purpose, and that's why she has value.
But why does the act of intentional creation confer purpose? Humans are also capable of acts of intentional creation. We have intentionally created life forms, in fact. We've cloned sheep, we have built protocells, and those things have purpose in as far as we intended them to exist and existed to fulfill some utility for us. Do those things have an innate value by fact of having been intentionally created that other organisms, say a sheep that was not cloned or a protocell that arose according simply to the laws of determinism, do not have?
Our gifts of creativity are awfully exciting. And yet, as the scriptures would insist, our gifts of creativity reflect the Creator. And although we can be creative, we are not eternal beings who are all-powerful the way God is. Our creativity is a small reflection of the creativity of God. So yes, we can attach value to people, animals, objects. We can sell one object for $1 million and another object for 50 cents. So we obviously can attach value. But to attach value in an objective way to a human life, in light of the fact that we're all human, and if there is no God, we're all the result of chance and fate, chance, mutations, natural selection, well, I mean, that's a nice bias, but it's just a bias. It's just a taste. It's arbitrary. It's not real in the sense that if you contradict it, you're wrong. If I contradict it, I'm wrong.
How is the attribution of value from God any less arbitrary than that, though? You've raised the point multiple times that God, if He exists, is eternal, as if the argument somehow hinges upon this, as if a subjective standard that exists in perpetuity is indistinguishable from an objective standard, and I don't see that this is obvious.
Okay. In order to have value, in order to have worth, in order to have a value of justice or compassion, you have to have a thinking mind. Inanimate matter has no ability to grasp justice, compassion, the worth of a human being. It takes a mind to understand those intangible, non-physical concepts.
That's absolutely wild that he thinks just because you can clone sheep, which I don't think you necessarily can. Yes, you can modify some genetics or whatever, but you can't like completely create a sheep on your own. Cloning is totally different. But yes, we are made in the image of God. We are created in the image of God. Therefore, don't you think we're going to be able to create because God is the ultimate creator? When we create, that's bringing glory to God.
If there is no mind prior to the human mind, then it's obviously the human mind that has created right, wrong, worth, lack of worth in our heads, which means it's simply a construct that we've put together. It has a beginning. It's not absolute in any sense. It's something we've created with our thinking. But if there is an eternal being who created reality, and not only did He create matter and energy, but He also created values of love, compassion, worth, and justice, then it's possible that those intangible, unseen values are real and not just the figment of the human imagination or the human mind.
Perhaps there's some sort of problem of communication. I feel like you've already had to make that point, and maybe I'm a little dense for not getting it after the second time. But God, having created reality and then proceeded to create values of justice, of truth and beauty and so forth, that act of creation on His part does not seem distinct from such an act of creation on the part of an individual human being. Although His consciousness, if He did exist by nature of being eternal, would precede ours, There is no obvious standard by which we might judge the values that he creates to be superior to the values that we create. Is it simply the fact that he came before us? Does he have primacy by nature of having been here first? Or is it superiority by way of having been responsible for our creation, such that we are supposed to defer to him merely because he is our creator, as if there is some value in that?
It has to do with the fact that he is God and I am not, which means he is eternal, I am not. He's all-powerful, I am not. He is perfectly just and holy, I am not. I'm a mixture of good and evil. He is not a mixture of good and evil. He has the ability to create on a far more massive scale, a far more deeper way than I do. For instance, God created something out of nothing. You and I can't do that. You and I cannot create something out of nothing. God can. So that's an example of how God is a being of a totally different order than you and I are.
Now, you say that the reason God's standards are binding is that he is perfectly just and holy by nature of being of a different order of being than we are. But were we not just discussing that God created the standards of justice and holiness? It doesn't seem that it's a terribly convincing argument that his will is the will to defer to in these matters because he is perfectly just, when the standard of justice is a standard that he himself set.
I've miscommunicated. You listen well. I thank you for taking me so seriously that you listen so well. God...
Okay. Exactly. If he's God, then he could create whatever world and problem in society and law that is right and wrong if he wants. He can decide whether something is right or wrong. And who are you to say that it's not okay if just God decides what's right and wrong? Then he's not just, because he's just deciding what he can do. Doesn't make any sense to me.
I misspoke. God did not create justice. God's character has been just throughout eternity. So justice is something that flows from the eternal character of God. So God didn't, in other words, wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to create a new value called justice. No. God is eternal. He has a character. His character is eternal. And justice is defined and is a value that has existed throughout eternity because it's what God's character is. So thanks for pushing for that clarification.
So, are you saying that there is an eternal character of justice to which God's character coincidentally conforms?
No. God's character is just, so it is God's character that defines justice. It is not justice that defines God's character.
So, God's character, by its nature, is the embodiment of justice. And this is the grounds on which his concept of justice is binding upon all other things. Is that what you're saying? By what criterion have you adjudged God's character to be the perfect embodiment of justice?
Obviously, only because God has chosen to reveal that by speaking through the Hebrew prophets. Secondly, by becoming a man in Jesus. He has revealed what is just. Secondly, as I look at the life of Christ that he lived out, in my best moments, I wish I could live that kind of life. I try to live that kind of life. I miserably fail, to be honest with you. I miserably fail in trying to live a life like Christ did. So, when I use my rational mind and my conscience and examine Jesus Christ, the way he lived, and then what he revealed about what is true, like by reading the Sermon on the Mount, my conscience and my rational mind say, wow, although I have not been successful in living up to that high standard, I certainly respect it. For instance, Robert Coles, a psychology professor at Harvard, wrote, all the writings on ethics over the past 2,000 years are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, is ethical brilliance. So, God has revealed what justice is. Through our consciences, we can begin to grapple with the value of justice. And then secondly, he's given us a very clear plumb line to measure our consciences against, and that plumb line is the Hebrew prophets and Jesus of Nazareth.
Isn't the intuition that we ought to be measuring our consciences against those works of God that you consider to be just indicative of the existence of a standard of justice internal to yourself and separate from that espoused by God? You are, in other words, judging these acts of God according to a standard that you hold, and judging God just based upon his conformity to your standard.
Yes.
So how is that different from case 3, in which justice is determined individually by humans, wherein you have now determined as an individual that God is the epitome of justice?
As a thinking human being, I have to grapple with the pursuit of truth. And Jesus made some truth claims. The Hebrew prophets made some truth claims. And so I, as a thinking, rational human being, have to look at those truth claims and ask myself, does the evidence point to those being reliable, credible, or does the evidence point to those being ridiculous, off the wall?
Yeah, and it's not like he's just saying, I'm conforming what I think is the best form of God, which is the Bible. He's not just forming God in his own image like a lot of people like to do. But when you realize that God is perfect and he knows all things and he is just and righteous, when you look at the evidence, it points to the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible is the most reliable.
Now,
Mr. Split says, the stronger your relationship with Christ, the more you're going to feel his return is near. Maybe because he is eternal and you're seeing his time, what was and what is and what will be.
I have a lot of friends who used to be atheists, and now they are following Christ. And one of them went to Harvard, and now he is a member of the church that I pastor. And he was real blunt with me and real honest with me. He said, when I went to Harvard, I wanted to live a certain lifestyle that was pretty promiscuous. I sort of in the back of my head thought that God existed. So when I lived this promiscuous lifestyle, I experienced guilt. But I figured out that the way to deal with my guilt was to wipe God out of the picture, because that would free me to live a morally relative life, to embrace that life philosophy, which then would free me to live a totally promiscuous life without any guilt. And he tells me it worked. But then he met this woman, who he's married to now, who had a relationship with Christ, and she began to challenge him, to love him, to be patient with him, but to challenge him to think more deeply about why did you buy into atheism? And he eventually broke and was very honest and said, I bought into atheism not because of some profound intellectual process, but I became an atheist because I needed to be able to justify my promiscuous lifestyle without having to carry around the baggage of guilt that I had done something wrong. Well,
Dr. Tour said in my interview with him, he said, sometimes he thinks that a lot of people who say they're atheists, it has to do with their genitals. And that could be the case for a lot of people. They want to sleep around with whoever they want, and it's so they don't have anyone telling them it's wrong.
Appreciate that kind of honesty tremendously.
So, when this man converted from atheism to Christianity, was this not simply indicative of his personal, internal, and relative standard of morality being revised by the actions of things in his environment, in this case, his wife, on his own consciousness?
No. I think the evidence is that every human being, be we atheist, agnostic, Hindu, Buddhist, Jew, Muslim, Christian, we all have conscience. Like it or not, you have a conscience. I have a conscience. The fascinating thing as I study conscience is, I don't automatically change my conscience, I argue with my conscience. Now, in my arguing with my conscience, I can get to the point where I sear my conscience so many times that my conscience gets quieter and quieter. I have done that. I have done what I thought was wrong so many times that I began to rationalize and be able to justify doing what was wrong. But if I will allow my conscience to speak to me, it will make me aware of the fact that indeed there are objective morals. And when I violate those objective morals, I experience guilt.
Through what mechanism is it that an unseared conscience is capable of ascertaining objective morality?
All you have to do is watch a child get abused. Then you ask yourself, is it objectively wrong to abuse a child? And because that's such a clear issue, I think the answer is abundantly clear to every one of us here. The abuse of an innocent child is absolutely wrong. Now, the intelligent professor, though, says, wait a second. It's not that clear cut. What happens if you've gone down in a boat at sea? There are 6 of you swimming in the water. There's one life raft that only fits 5. The 6th will make the life raft sink. So if you're one of 6 swimming around in the ocean with a life raft that only has room for 5, what are you going to do? And the point of the professor is, you see, morality is relative. But here's where I disagree with the professor. The only reason that that is an ethical dilemma, gosh, what do we do, guys? There's only 5 seats and there's 6 of us, is because we understand the value of human life. If we didn't understand the value of human life, there would be no ethical dilemma. I blow you away and I take the seat. It's not wrong for me to blow you away or dunk you under and hold you under until you drown. You see, the only reason you've got an ethical dilemma there is because you treasure human life. Yeah. If you didn't treasure human life, there'd be no ethical dilemma.
We don't need to get into strange utilitarian edge cases to see the problem with this, though. We can get back to the original question of abusing an innocent child. It's not obvious that this is objectively incorrect. Before the audience or anyone else feels the need to jump down my throat for saying this, I personally feel that we should not abuse innocent children, but I'm under no illusion that this is anything other than a personal preference or a personally held taste that does not in any way necessarily correspond to an objective morality outside of my personal structure of preferences and tastes. Now, when you were speaking of consciences earlier, particularly the unseared conscience that you have not repeatedly abused by doing things that it has told you already are incorrect, you spoke as if that conscience somehow transcended structures of personal preference and taste and was in contact with an objective morality. And I am still curious as to exactly how that is supposed to function.
The way your conscience functions, I hope, is that although you can tell me intellectually that you...
Walter G. says, read the Bible and get closer to God, guys. I'm new to being a follower of Christ. This is my way of spreading the gospel. Praise God. I'm glad that you are following Jesus, man. That means the world. It's the best decision ever. And for this guy, I can't believe he said that a child getting abused is objective. That's absolutely mind-blowing. But if you're an atheist, you have to admit it is objective if there is no God. Obviously, there is a God, though.
Realize that the abuse of an innocent child is not objectively wrong. I don't think you can live that out. I think that 100 times out of 100, 1,000 times out of 1,000, when you are confronted by the abuse of an innocent child, you never say, well, this is possibly okay.
I certainly hope that would be the case as well. I like to think of myself as the sort of person who would not stand by and watch an innocent child be abused. But we're failing to distinguish here between the way in which a subjective standard of morality is binding upon the person who holds it subjectively, and the way that an objective standard of morality would be binding upon every person. The fact that my ethical tastes and preferences are particular to me and only me gives them no lesser power of compulsion over me, under the assumption that this is the way that ethical tastes and preferences function, of course, then an objective standard would be binding upon me and you and everyone else here listening to this talk. In what manner, then, are these things to be distinguished from each other?
Yeah. Oh, what happened? No, something happened. It always does this. Whoa. All right, let's see here. I don't know why it did this. Reboot. I know, I'm gonna need to here.
What's much more
This function, of course, then an objective standard would be binding upon me and you and everyone else here listening to this talk. In what manner, then, are these things to be distinguished from each other?
All right. Please stop eating that wrap. Why? Because wraps with lettuce and turkey?
It's chicken.
Chicken? That's not tasty. What's much more tasty is roast beef in there with tomatoes. Okay, that's taste. And I think I'm an arrogant twit if I try and convince her that eating that wrap is wrong. Because it's a matter of taste. But if she is abusing an innocent child, I'm going to look her in the face and say, when you abuse this innocent child, that is absolutely wrong. And there is a qualitative difference between the two.
Is there?
Absolutely, yes. There's a qualitative difference between, I don't like the taste of chicken with green wrap. You should have whole wheat bread and roast beef, versus, please do not abuse an innocent child, for that is evil. Qualitative difference between the two. No, I cannot put justice in the bottom of a test tube. But you see, that's why I'm different from my atheist friends. Because my atheist friends have limited reality to matter and energy, which means you better be able to put it in the bottom of this test tube. Otherwise, it's probably not real. And I'm standing here saying, please examine your life and realize that all of reality cannot be put in the bottom of a test tube. There is a value of justice that you cannot scientifically verify, but instead you need to use your conscience and your observation of life to understand that that value of justice is objective.
Thank you very much for giving me your time.
Thank you.
Wow. I can't believe he's just said, is there really a difference between saying that there's something absolutely wrong compared to... I can't believe he said there's something... What's the difference between saying that you should only eat roast beef on your sandwich compared to saying abusing a child is wrong? That's crazy. But that's what atheists have to live by at the end of the day, sadly. Wow, that's crazy. That's why I say that mindset is very dangerous and it's very flawed when it comes to an atheistic mindset. So definitely wild and crazy, guys. Super, super crazy. How's everyone's day going? How was everyone's new year? The first day of 2025 going? I'm kind of sick. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Hopefully you guys are doing good. I'm kind of sick, but it's fine. All right. Romans 3:23 says, "For everyone has sinned, we've all fall short of God's glorious standards." That's why we need a Savior. I encourage you to go to Jesus today. So please click the link in the description. It will help you decide to follow Jesus for the first time. It will be the best decision of your entire life. Thank you guys so much for watching. Read Zechariah 1 side by side with Revelation 6. It is an interesting connection. Interesting. Bad weather here, it's meh. Oops.
They're not a god.
Right.
All right. Bye, Ronnie. Well, I hope that you guys all seek Jesus and have an amazing day. I'm going to react to one more video. Have an amazing day. Is the stream over? I think I'm lagging, lol. I hope not. I'm sorry. All right. I'm just getting everything going good here. All right, so Diary of a CEO has a conversation with a scientist about the existence of God, and I think it will blow you away. So let's get right into it.
And then a sub-question to that would be, what form does this God take? Are these questions that you seek to answer?
Me personally, yes. My colleagues tend to shy away from it. It's considered somewhat anathema or distasteful for a real, honest-to-goodness, workaday scientist to even contemplate the possibility of God.
Wow.
And for me, I call myself a practicing, very devout agnostic, in the sense that I take my Judaism. In my case, I'm a practicing Jew. But the question of what to take on faith, which in Hebrew, by the way, the word amen comes from the Hebrew word emunah, which means faith. It means to believe in something. I would say, I don't believe in gravity. If I take this rock and I draw, I don't have to believe in it. I have evidence for it. Science, the word science means knowledge. It doesn't mean, faith. It doesn't mean, religion or theology. But for me, thinking about God provides the most luxurious or the most delightful sort of spice to the research, to the hard work that I'm doing, knowing that the team and I that are trying to answer these questions, we can possibly resolve the question of whether or not the universe began as, for example, it begins in the Torah, the Old Testament, the biblical narrative that underpins the Judaism and Christianity and in Islam as well of, half the world's population. What if we could substantiate that narrative? What if we could refute it? A good scientist has to be open to both. So for me personally, I've always been interested in those existential questions. I don't put myself out there as a rabbi or some exemplar of perfection as religion, but I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to dedicate my life to answering questions that others have posed and stand on their shoulders to hopefully get a closer glimpse of truth. But it's absolutely 100% in my mind inexorably linked. The question of a creator and the question of its creation or his creation, if you will. But as I say, for the first time in history, myself, my colleagues, and I, we might be able to start to answer that question with scientific hard data.
The question of whether there's a God or not, and which God is most accurately represented by the science.
Yeah, and the creation stories that those religions tell themselves or tell the world.
You've raised a $200 million project. What does that mean? And what is the question you're seeking to fundamentally answer with that $200 million project?
Yeah, let me take a step back. So for 2,000 years, most scientists, people believe the universe was eternal, had been around forever. And then, not far from here, in north of Hollywood, is a telescope, a 100-inch diameter telescope, 5 meters across. And that telescope was used by Edwin Hubble. Hubble observed that every single galaxy that he could see is moving away from the Milky Way galaxy. So every galaxy, which are collections of 100 billion suns, just like our sun, is expanding away from us.
How could he see that through a telescope?
So he used what's called the redshift. So the redshift is an effect that is related to what Christian Doppler discovered called the Doppler shift. You ever heard an ambulance and it's coming towards you and it gets higher in frequency? And it goes, where. That's the Doppler shift. The waves of sound are piling up. Their frequency is getting getting higher and higher. The wavelength is getting piled up in the direction it's going, the source, and it's getting lower in the opposite direction. The same exact thing happens with light. Wow. Instead of getting higher pitch and lower pitch, lower frequency means redder colors. So red is a longer wavelength of light than is blue light. He saw everything is moving away from it, us in the Milky Way. It was a very puzzling discovery. It went against 2,500 years of received wisdom. He observed it with data. It was incontrovertible. Every single galaxy is moving away from the Milky Way galaxy, our galaxy. He said either, we didn't put on our cosmic deodorant and no one wants to be around us, or the universe is getting bigger. Tomorrow, it will be bigger than it was today. The separation between galaxies will be larger than it is today.
Wow. That's crazy. The Bible does talk about the heavens are constantly stretching out. And to think, I hope one day we're going to be able to find out more and more about the existence of God or to show, oh, wow, God is right. The Bible is right. And every time we do find things out more and more, it's not debunking the Bible or debunking God. It's more proving the existence of God.
The implication, Stephen, if you go back another day before today, yesterday, things were closer. Keep playing that movie backwards, you come to a point, perhaps a singularity, where all the matter, all the energy, everything that is, was, or ever will be was concentrated effectively at a single point. That's the Big Bang. And so in the Big Bang cosmology, the universe starts at a particular moment. Time comes into existence. The elements come into existence. All the elements, in water, instead of hydrogen in water, rather, they all come into existence. And then over billions of years, those elements come together over the force of gravity. They will eventually fuse two hydrogens together to make helium and so forth. And you get the heavier and heavier elements. Eventually, those objects called stars They eventually burn up and blow up in what's called a supernova. And before they blow up, they create all sorts of other matter that we're made of: calcium, oxygen, nitrogen, iron. And in their death throw, in their explosive fireworks-like ending of their lives, they give life to us because they blast out into the cosmos, into the galaxy, the material that we're made of. So literally, as Carl Sagan said, we are star stuff. And I brought some star stuff here today. So these are different byproducts. This is the shrapnel of an exploded star. This is mostly made of iron. Here, I brought these, and I give these away on my website. I made a special website for your listeners, briankeating.com/diary. This is a meteorite, Stephen. Have you ever seen a meteor in the atmosphere? That's a rock like that, a mineral, coursing through our atmosphere at tens of thousands of miles per hour.
How do you know?
How do we know? We measure their velocity. We can track them on radar.
How do you know that this is a meteorite?
Oh, this has all the characteristics of a meteorite. Its composition, its density, its structure. It has that weird pattern on it. But if you're really curious, what we could do,
So where does this come from then?
this one was found in Argentina, in a place called the Field of the Stars.
And this could have come from anywhere in the universe.
Exactly. This is basically a fragment of an asteroid that
All right, hi John. Yeah, I'm going live around these times each day, like 4 p.m.
existed before the Earth, Stephen. This is a fragment, a fossil relic of our solar system from over 4 billion years ago, older than our Earth, because our Earth formed at its core. Our Earth has iron inside of it. It has an iron core, just like that. That's pretty heavy, right? That's not, and it also made this here. This, if you give this to your sweetheart, if you compress this by 100,000 times and give it to your sweetheart, she'll be really happy about that. That's pure carbon.
So that'll turn into a diamond.
It'll turn into a diamond. I like to say,
Whoa.
pressure is what turns dust into diamonds.
For anyone that can't see this right now, it looks like a dice. It's almost identical to like a black dice.
It's
but
got,
light as
exactly.
well.
Yep, it's very light. Now contrast that to, and here's a piece of rock. This is mostly volcanic rock. I collected that in Antarctica. I've been to Antarctica twice. To the South Pole, I collected that specimen there. It has holes in it. See the holes?
Yeah.
Those come from bubbling, escaping volcanic gases. So there's volcanoes down at the South, in Antarctica, not the South Pole. And then here's this one. This is found in Namibia.
Heavy.
So this is a meteorite found in Namibia, also from the same process that formed our solar system. This was found by the natives that lived there several hundred or maybe even 1,000 years ago. This one's particularly nice. If you're not watching, it looks like a human foot.
And I can't explain how unbelievably heavy that is.
Yes.
I don't think I've held something that's this size but this heavy before.
It's extremely dense. It's the dense. So what happens when a star tries to make the iron in that? It takes more energy to make that, fuse that nuclei of iron than is given off in the fusion process. So therefore the star can't support its weight. It collapses, it explodes and rebounds. Now, when your listeners or viewers go to my website and if they win one, you'll see how attractive these things are to
Compelling evidence that you've ever encountered that there might be a God.
This is a long.
All right, so now we're going to see what is the most compelling evidence where there might be a God. It is 22:23 p.m. here in my place, quite late. I see. Now we're going to see what is the most compelling evidence that there might be a God. So let's get into it.
Question. Well, I hope you'll find it someday too. At least in my religion, in Judaism, God is the creator and he's the organizer. He creates light and darkness. He creates day and night. He creates heaven and earth. He creates beasts and earth and fishes and so forth. And then he creates man. And we can't really emulate God. Even if you don't believe in God, you can imagine what a God would be like, right? You can conceptualize, imagine, King Charles, times a trillion or whatever, like the all-powerful force. But at the same time, we're told God is a father, our Father who art in heaven, right? And he's a Lord. He's like a politician. He's a king. He's their father in this Judeo-Christian concept. it's hard to kind of reconcile what that means because we don't really have analogies to it. But the one analogy we do get is the one thing that we can create, which is a human. Now, I think for that reason, men and women have a stake in what it means to feel a connection to God. Women much more so. It's almost impossible for a man to comprehend what it's like to have the ability to be a vessel for life's creation. I think that's part of the evidence for it. I also think that there's some clues, but again, it's not proof. You cannot prove God exists. You cannot prove God doesn't exist. You have to be comfortable with that ambiguity, and very few people are.
If we came from a single cell organism, as some people say, then giving birth seems to be quite a new concept. Because, if you think about some of the evolutionary stories of, the single cell organism that then divided, and then, Darwinism's theory that it was the environment that defined how we give birth, and different animals give birth or replicate in different ways. So if you go back far enough, it seems that like giving birth as we know it, which is this like process where the baby comes out and they cut the cord, is actually quite recent in the history of consciousness, but also just like living organisms.
Does that make it more or less miraculous? Or
It's so amazing, but it doesn't feel like it gives me, I don't know, there's something in my mind that thinks if a single cell organism, I don't know, gazillion years ago, split because of some mutation which caused more single cell organisms to split, I mean, I guess it's still creation, isn't it?
And then you could ask the question, what if there was a creator, and this creator not only created that first cell, but created within that cell the possibility, the propensity, and had the knowledge, we can't comprehend it, but had the knowledge that will eventually make a person and have consciousness and be able to conceptualize God. Now, I'm not saying
That's crazy to think about. Like, oh, what are the chances that a single cell, all by itself, even came to existence in first? But how in the world did the cell get there in the first place? And then split and had the right program to make all of this without a creator. That's the problem. But with a creator, that's easy. And everything that we look to and understand seems to be pointing to a creator. So it's wild.
evidence for it, but just you can see which would be a greater miracle, that like God encrypted in the DNA code
Bye Muppet.
that eventually there'll be a Stephen Bartlett or Brian Keating, or that those are natural processes that are the inevitable conclusion of creation of life and evolution, as you say in Darwinian theory, for which we have abundant evidence, right? I don't know which is more miraculous, and that's why
But
miracles.
humans are pretty new, aren't they? So
Oh yeah,
How-
mammals like egg.
how old is the conscious human?
The conscious, I mean, the first like Homo sapiens that are of our species, probably 200,000 years old, maybe.
So it's only been for 200,000 years that we've been able to think about the possibility of God, which is almost in a weird way. You could say God has only existed for 200,000 years.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And in fact, many people, and I like to say this, to you, like, what's your favorite day of the year, like on the calendar?
I was
Your
going to say my
birthday,
birthday. Yeah.
Okay. I always ask people that. I say, like, what's your favorite day? And usually I'll get Christmas, my anniversary, my birthday, my first kid's birthday, whatever. But those are all origins. We're fascinated by origins because you weren't there. Like, you can't witness like the whole process of your birth. You have to rely on your mother and your father, and maybe there's some pictures and a nurse. But now go back to the beginning of the universe. Well, maybe there was only one entity. Maybe it was only God. And why did God make the universe? And then, of course, there's many, many questions. The most kind of stringent, or perhaps most challenging question is, why does evil exist? Why would a good God create suffering, childhood leukemia? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So the standard answer for that question is that to not have randomness, to not have chaos, to not have variability in life would necessitate a predetermined existence. And a lot of people believe that. I've talked to Sam Harris on my podcast. He's been on here. He believes strict determinism. every single thing, what's happening to us right now, the words that are coming out of my mouth, your ear twitching or whatever it's doing, that's all determined. There's no control. There's free will is a complete and utter illusion. And because of that, then there doesn't have to be an explanation of why there's, leukemia in children or whatever. And yes, that is an unanswered question. And I think, but I don't think it's a sufficient question not to do stuff. People would ask, why does a child get leukemia? But they won't ask, why do humans experience the highest pleasures, the highest sensations, both physically, viscerally, but also emotionally and spiritually? That we, unique among all the creations on earth, have this ability to appreciate our finite existence, to have love, to have, whatever these connections are. That's what makes life living. Now, we can't answer why is that? Like, do we deserve that?
So for me, the evil and good and like pleasure and pain make lots of sense from an evolutionary perspective. It makes a lot of sense as to why you would feel this overwhelming sense of like love and protection when you gave birth, when your son or your daughter arrives in the world, because that feeling is passed down from your ancestors, and your ancestors had that feeling, so they survived and their offspring survived, and that feeling gets stronger as it's passed down because those that have it are more likely to pass on their DNA. So the DNA of that feeling keeps passing through the generation. So I get that, and then with evil, I can also understand that pretty well, because if we think of evil maybe as a feeling or as something that happens or a disease, I can understand that theoretically.
Evil's human, is human related. There's no evil cancer. Cancer's not evil.
And even that I can understand because I can understand the brain is so fragile, and I can understand all these human instincts and chemicals and jealousy and even love comes with it. But if a woman dies, it's probably her husband statistically. So like I understand, that's evil, isn't it? But but it's love as well. So I understand the complexities of all of that. What I can't understand is what active role God is playing in any of this stuff. And I was religious until I was 18, and then I think I fell down a rabbit hole listening to like Richard Dawkins and some of the others and Sam Harris, and it left me in a position where I would probably define myself as being agnostic, but there's still this big question mark which hangs above my life, which is like, where did human life come from? And is it possible that it just didn't come from anywhere? Is it possible that there was a big bang, at the very start of all of this? It caused lots of reactions. One such reaction was fusing some chemicals which fused in the right order over millions and millions of years, and it started to move in a way that like plants can't move, and that then led rise to this sort of evolutionary process. And now
Wow. That's crazy that he used to be religious and then now he's like not. I would say when he asks, so where's God in all of this? I would say he is in everything that you're going through. He even sent his one and only son, Jesus, to live a life, to go through things that you've gone through, to experience things that all humans have experienced, to experience the most excruciating pain by dying on the cross for your sins because he loves you. He's there. Or maybe God created you. You think that the chance of you coming here by accident is more probable than Jesus, than God creating you? I don't think so.
here I am, and my brain was just bigger 200,000 years ago than the other monkeys. So now that I've developed this thing called conscious, where I can think about things, and here I am trying to figure it all out now that I have this bigger brain thanks to Darwinian evolution. Is that the game? And when people hear me say that, they probably think, the natural reaction to that is because it threatens your sense of like purpose and belonging, and it threatens justice. Your natural reaction to that is, no, I hope it's not. And so let me think of ways that can't possibly be true. But I'm not tempted by that. I'm tempted by figuring out what's true, irrespective of how warm and fuzzy it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't know. But I'm hoping science has some answers for me.
Well, yeah, sorry to disappoint. Right now, the connection, that logical chain that you produced, has a lot of so-called missing links. But you said something that's very interesting to me. You said you consider yourself an agnostic. And it sounds like, in other words, it sounds to me like you're doing things that an atheist does. Like you're not going to church, you're not, observing mass or whatever you would do if you're. But what do? And because if you're an agnostic, there should be some behavior that's similar to a theist.
Why?
Because then you're just an atheist, right? I mean, in other words, what practices? I'm a behaviorist in my life, so I judge people on how they act and how they behave, and you know a lot about this. So, how do you behave as if there could be a God? You said maybe you want science to explain it. You didn't say like, I would like to have a personal revelation from Jesus. I would like to encounter him. Or whatever, Vishnu, I don't care what religion is, but how do you, in practice, live your life such that if God does exist, that it would make a difference in the way that you're perceived or judged, if you will?
Yeah, well, I don't, because I guess I don't know what practice, because I don't know what God exists or which story is true. I don't know what practice is true.
Do you think if God, let's say you were Hindu, right?
Yeah.
let's say you're not Hindu. Let's say you are what you are, Presbyterian or the Church of
But if I
England.
had a practice, wouldn't that make me religious?
Well, I'm saying, do you think if there is a God, we have to do this matrix, right? Let's say God exists, God doesn't exist. Stephen behaves like he's religious, Stephen doesn't behave like he's religious, right? So right now you're in one of those quadrants. You're not sure God exists. So you're behaving maybe as if he doesn't exist. I'm asking you, and now he could exist or he could not exist. So imagine you move into another quadrant. You say, I'm going to behave like I'm Hindu, or come down to my temple in San Diego, whatever. You're going to behave in some religion. Do you think if God exists, he's going to say, "Oh God, Stephen, you picked the wrong one. It's Jainism. It's whatever. It's Latter-day Saint." I don't think. I think a revolutionary statement. I think God has common sense. If he exists. If he doesn't exist, it doesn't matter what you do, right? But if God exists, he must have common sense, meaning that if you make an earnest attempt to understand or at least engage yourself religiously, not believe and force yourself to believe, not make excuses for evil that happens in the world or cancer for kids. But if you behave in a certain way, I don't think if God exists, big if, you'll be judged harshly.
Okay, but the problem is the Bible says that the only way to the Father is to Jesus. So you have to, because all these gods make all of these gods make truth claims. In these truth claims, we have to decide whether or not we are going to follow Jesus. We have to decide whether or not Jesus is true or not. Because you can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to serve whatever God. That's fine. No big deal. But this is all very interesting and crazy. What are you guys' thoughts on this? We obviously should only serve God, not ourselves. John 14:6 says, Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. So guys, I encourage you to go to Jesus today. I encourage you to go to Jesus today. You guys might have doubts. You guys might have insecurities or things that are going on and you're not for sure. But making a decision to follow him and to have a relationship with him will be the best thing that you could ever do. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please click the link in the description to help you decide to follow Jesus for the first time. It will be the best decision of your entire life. Thank you guys so much for watching. All right, guys, that's the end of my live stream. I'm going to let you guys go. I am kind of sick. So be praying for me to feel better. And I will pray for you guys to have an amazing year. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for everyone watching this today. I pray that you'll be with them. Keep them safe. Help them to know that they are loved by you, God. Thank you for working in their life and loving them and caring for them. And thank you for all that you're doing. So be with everyone here today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, have an amazing day. Bye. Thank you, Jean. All right.